Hey guys, it's Rachel with Restorations by Rachel, and this beautiful dresser is my project for this week. It is going to be with the theme of Old World Opulence. So theme was not picked by me. Lisa with Ivy Lane Interiors did a really fun furniture challenge with that theme. She does one about twice a year. This is my second one in which to participate, and it's a lot of fun. So you'll get to see my interpretation of that, and I'll let you know who wins at the end too. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply stripper to the top because I know I'm going to re-stain this. And I forgot I had the thing on here. I'll have to try to pry that off. But I'm using Green Easy stripper. You've seen me use this before. I love that it is eco-friendly. I don't have to wear a respirator. It's a soy-based stripper, and it just works really, really well. So you want to be generous with it, and the bottle says that it has a work time of about 2 to 4 hours, but I've had luck with it in about an hour being ready to go. And with the heat, I mean, you can hear the bugs outside. I'll sometimes need to come in with a light coat because it'll want to dry, but it still works great just after that light coat. Even when I'm applying that light coat, a lot of times it'll still be like wanting to rub off as I brush it on, but I think the most helpful to go ahead and put on a little bit extra, and that way you're not fighting, trying to get the stripper off, or it didn't work well, and then you're having to go put a ton back on there. But, you know, as you do this more, you will get an idea of how it's supposed to look, you know, to show that it has worked and gotten the finish off or the paint off. So I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of this guy was, but it's stuck on there pretty well, but I'm just going to use my little scraper here to get it off without hopefully damaging the veneer. All right, there we go. And then the stripper should be able to get off any of that gummy stuff that's on there. So it's been right at an hour, and there's some areas where it looks like it might be a little bit too dry. Like I might need to add more of the stripper. So I'm just gonna test it out. Oh, this is interesting. It was like a weird layer on top. This might have to sit a little bit longer, but you can see it's definitely got up that lacquer. But I might stir it around a little bit and let it sit for a little bit longer. Add some more in a few spots. While the stripper is doing its magic, I'm taking the time to pull out the drawers and being sure to label them so I put them back the right place, and then removing the hardware. So just because of life and running around doing some things, this ended up sitting for about 3 hours. So I'm hoping it hasn't dried out too much on me. It's hot, but it is kind of humid. I do see a couple spots that I'm not sure how to come off, but I'm going to get going on stripping. But yeah, it's coming off well. And it'll still keep this red hue from being wet, but to see after I get it cleaned up and dried how much of the stain is still on there. And I like to hold on to boxes from different things that I order to get to use for stripping. It's really easy. You know, I have seen people line them with plastic, like an old paint can or boxes, so then you can just, you know, dispose of the plastic bag, but I like this method. It's fine. So next step is to use the finishing cleaner. Green Easy's finishing cleaner helps get off any of the like extra bits of stain or paint, depending on what you're stripping. I'm using a fine steel wool pad. It's like a quadruple zero, and I will go in sections because I've had before this cleaner stain the wood a little bit if it sets for too long. So I'll scrub it down, and then wipe it off with the paper towel. Honestly, there's not a whole lot of excess that I feel like I'm getting. There will be more around the trim. Well, no, I'm definitely still getting some. So I'll keep going. So the finish paint, whatever was on here, is a lot thicker. So even when I stripped it, there's still quite a bit left. But to make it a little bit easier, my aim better, I'm just spraying it into the pad. And then I'm scrubbing it on there. See, it's coming off a little bit better in some spots. That spot's being pretty stubborn. I might have to get a fresh pad too. But I'll just keep working along here. I've already done a couple sections and I felt like it came off better than it really is here. And of course I'm going to have to sand, but I just like to get as much off with this as I can, so my sanding, I'm not going to possibly burn through the veneer, and then it just makes sanding go a lot faster. So here it is. It's about maybe 10 more minutes it took me to get around the rest of the way on the front. And here it is, it's drying. You see like more of the finish is off in some of these other spots. I think that's where I scrubbed with the finishing cleaner a little bit more, but it's looking good. And I think, once I sand it, that it'll be good to go. I don't think I need another round with the stripper. So everything is dried out now, and I am ready to sand to get the stain off. There's still quite a bit of the stain on there, but I find that anything red mahogany, it's just hard to get it completely off with the stripper, and I don't feel like doing a second round because I think it's safe enough to sand. Just because your concern with sanding is that you're taking the wood off as well with the sandpaper, but with a stripper, you're just lifting off the stain and the finish, or the paint, if it was paint. But I think we'll be good to go. I'm going to use a 120 grit, and I'll be careful around the edges because that's where it seems that you can burn through the veneer faster. But I'm going to get going, and then I'll work up to 180 and probably 220 after that. So now since this front part is curved, it would be very unwise to take my orbital sander or even my 3x4 surf prep sander to this. So, you know, I do have the foam attachments on my surf prep sander too, but I'm just gonna use this one. Actually, it looks like this one. I need to grab a new one, but I will when I go to sand, but just for demonstration purposes, you know, you just put it on there like any other sanding pad. It's just like a little interface, and then you put your sanding pad on top of there. And then when you go to sand, it contours to your surface. So it'll be great, and I'll get to going. As you can see, I have several spots here on the top that, you know, there's scratches or whatever through the years that they didn't come up with sanding. So the surface is uneven. So I'm going to use a method I've tried before with pretty good success on something like this. It's a damp t-shirt, rag, whatever you want to use. This is an old t-shirt. And I put it on here, and then I have the iron already warm. And then you're trying to basically put moisture down in there to then get the fibers of the wood to come up. And then you come in with sandpaper. It's a little bit more raised now. And you can sand it down pretty smooth. Definitely feels flatter. That's better. All right, I'm going to try this spot here too. Yeah, that seems to be working really well that time. There's still some variation, but you can tell it's gotten a lot of it. So the center drawers hardware were different than the other drawers, and I didn't particularly like them, so I decided to replace them. I did a poll on Instagram and also asked y'all here on the communities tab, and option B was the most popular. So I am taking these off, and oh my goodness, were they difficult. You can see I struggled at this, and the whatever pin nails they had in there were just really difficult to get out and ripped up the veneer as I was working. Okay, so holy moly, that totally chewed up the front of these trying to get those little plates off there. And then even when I was like trying to come from behind with the screwdriver to press on it out, like that came loose. So the hardware was staying on there, but then that popped off. So I'm gonna get to glue that and clamp that. So thankfully, this is not a big deal to fix. It's just a matter of using some wood glue and clamps. So I am going to just drizzle this along the joint where it's going to connect. And then put it back together. There we go. And yeah, just want to check if I got glue down there. And then clamp it. Whoops, that didn't clamp very well, did it? Here, I'm going to switch it so the weight is balanced. So you want to wipe back, so you don't have to come back and sand it. You want to wipe back any of this excess wood or wood glue. Makes it easier on you in the future. There's not really any. And then under there that I can get to. So let that sit. I always forget the time. A minimum of 30 minutes, but I'll let that sit longer just so it dries up nicely. For cleaning, I am just using Dawn soap since it's such a good degreaser. These things are quite dirty, so I'm giving it pretty strong scrub down because I don't want to have any issues with my primer or paint not sticking. I fought that with the last dresser, so I'm doing my best to have learned that lesson well. And then also after I'm done, I'll go through and wipe it down with just wet water or clean water and a clean towel to get any of the soap residue off. Just wanted to line up some of these drawers so you could see, just how many little dings and scratches are throughout. There's some spotting from where I cleaned it, but it's pretty consistent throughout the dresser and the drawer top. So there's going to be a lot of filling that I have to do. I'll start out with Bondo and then get the little ones that I can see as I go, and primer. After I prime, will show what I missed. Bondo is a two-part epoxy. You have the main putty and then the blue is the hardening agent. And once you mix that together, you have about like a minute to work with the product. And then it hardens hard enough to sand within 15 minutes. So it's a really great filler. As you can see, I found a few spots that needed to be filled. So I'm going to get to work on sanding those and then maybe get a coat of primer on tonight. We'll see. Since all the drawer fronts are curved, I am using that foam attachment again for sanding as I go, and I'm using a 120 grit. Now, I am not sanding the trim parts of the drawer fronts because I have misshapen them, burned through the shape of them before. So I'm just doing the parts that are smooth. So it's a little laughable that I thought I might get primer on here tonight. It's 9:15, which is not really too late, but my son has an 8 a.m. baseball game tomorrow, and that's all the sanding I've gotten done so far. I also think I may be getting a cold that my kids have had, so I think it's probably best that I shut it down and hit this back again in a couple days, because tomorrow is a full day, and I usually take Sunday off, but excited to tackle this on Monday morning. Okay, so it is Monday morning, T-minus 5 days before I need to have all this done, but I actually realized I basically need to have it finished Friday because Saturday, some sweet friends are gonna watch our kids for us, so my husband and I can go on an overnight date to celebrate our anniversary, 17 years, which is kind of crazy to believe, but it'll be fun to get to go do that. But I've got a lot of work to do. So I need to, finish sanding, prime, sand the top, fix any other repairs. So I kind of need to get going. That's a mom doing all my other mom stuff. That's just day-to-day, laundry, food, all that. But So yeah, I'm gonna get going. My plan is to finish sanding and then prime, and then I'll work on the top and switch to painting. So let's get going. So I just want to highlight this one corner of the dresser. You know, I'm sanding here, but it's pretty chewed up and beat up, and so I'm just going over it with my 120 grit right now on my orbital sander, and I'm gonna try to get this side and then get this side, and then see kind of what I'm left with that I'm trying to fix and get a little bit more, I guess, smooth and uniform. So it definitely is better. You know, there's some areas that I think I'll probably have to build up a little bit with Bondo, especially down here. It's a little bit more beat up, but overall it's a lot better. So I think just sanding it down to raw wood helped a lot. So you may have noticed that I have not used my orbital sander on areas where there's this trim. That's out of shot, but in here, well, that's because before in the past, like even with that foam pad, it has like misshapen the trim, and I obviously do not want that to happen. So I'm going to take my Surf Prep sander there, and it isn't quite as, I guess, strong or abrasive as the orbital sander. And I'm going to use a foam pad as well, since we have so many curves and whatnot, and then go over it. So it should get it sanded smooth, be a little bit slower, but it'll be safer and work. This one is their medium grit sandpaper. I've obviously used it before, so it is worn a bit, but I'm hoping it'll still work well. I don't think it's completely worn down yet. And their medium is around a 120 to 150 grit. For these areas between the trim, I'm going to, just for extra precaution, use my sanding sponge and get down in there just to especially make sure that like these little spots right there have gotten scuffed up, so they'll take the primer better. So I have everything wiped down now after all that sanding. I even wiped on the inside of the dresser, so get the additional dust out. But you know, one thing that you want to be looking for while you're sanding and then wiping down is little things that you miss that you need to fix. Like this is coming loose, there's some scratches there that I'm going to have to fill in, and then there's a few more like that on the drawers. So I'm going to do that, probably going to use my glazing putty, and then hopefully be able to start priming. For this one I thought about using my brad nailer, but just decided to wood glue it. Probably be easier than flipping it on its back, and so I could access it with my brad nailer. So put that in there and gonna clamp it up real nice. Let that sit for 45 minutes or an hour, and it should be good to go. And of course, always wipe back the excess glue. Another last thing, I think it's last, that I'm going to do is the little nail holes in the trim. And you know, it's not as noticeable when it's stained, but I find when it's painted, the sheen of the paint will reflect those holes, and so I'm gonna fill those in too. All right, so I have gotten this moved over to where I like to paint. I've gotten the top covered. I've decided to stain last. I'll have to be a little careful once everything's painted and I'm staining, just that I don't mess up the paint, but that's the plan. Hopefully that goes okay. And so now it's just time to prime, and I'm going to go ahead and prime like these edges first before I put the drawers in. That's why the drawers aren't in there yet, but I will paint with the drawers in there, just because it's easier when the drawers are inset like that. So I think it's only like 97 here today, so that's why I look the way that I do. It is hot. I'm hoping that everything still dries okay. Primer I'm not too worried about, but I'm gonna get going. So this will give you an idea of what I'm talking about, where primer shows places you miss. Like there's a couple of spots here. I'm gonna go ahead and caulk along the seams here. Like that one's pretty bad. And then I will use my spot and glazing putty for this area where there's grain. I'm only doing that because it's not consistent throughout, and I think it'll look a little funny to just have it in spots here and there, like it's down here as well. So that's something I'll work on, and then I'll smooth everything down before I do a second coat of primer. Wasn't bad at all, huh? Oh goodness. So I'm gonna get this sanded down and caulk, and then one more coat of primer. Now, a really important step before you paint is to filter your paint. I have found clumps and whatnot in even new cans of paint or top coat. So your sprayer doesn't get clogged up, you want to make sure you do that. And then I dilute it by about 10%. I also always test spray with the paint before I put it on the dresser. That way I know it's the consistency that I want. And then as I spray, I am overlapping by about 50% on each pass. I'm holding it 6 inches away from the surface, or obviously as close as I can get to that. And that's going to give me the most even spray, and that distance is what is suggested by the manufacturer of my sprayer. Now, this is the first time that I've used this brand of paint. I've heard really, really great things about it. It is best for use with a sprayer. That's what Wise Owl says. It's not going to go on quite as well with a brush because it has an hour dry time. So you can literally do another sand and coat in an hour, which is pretty unbelievable. So here it is after just one coat. I have done a light sand over it, but I mean, honestly, it was so smooth feeling that I didn't need to. It was only a couple of spots where I found maybe like some splatters from the paint. So I'm gonna get going with the second coat, and this one might just need two. Now the only downside to spraying with the drawers in is that you have to come through and hand paint this, but it's not too much like, work. The only thing I find that I have to be careful of is that I don't have any kind of excess paint that drips or pulls along the edge. So sometimes I just take my finger and wipe along the edge there once I'm finished. And then when I'm done, I just make one continuous stroke along there, although that got messed up, but it probably just need two coats, but we'll see. It might need a third. So I have not ever had hardware do this before. I'm thinking it's just some kind of brass plating that was on there originally, so I'm gonna have to clean all that off. And then I'll put the rub and buff on there to make it look nice. So here's how they're looking after I've cleaned it all up. It was definitely some brass plated or brass colored metal, so I'm going to try the rub and buff on there. If that doesn't work very well, then I'll pivot maybe a spray paint or something. So I had said I hoped I could do two coats, but I got a little, I guess, impatient with going ahead and doing that second coat. And I think with the heat, it just didn't like splatten out as well as the first coat did. So I'm going to sand it down with a high grit sandpaper, and then I will get my last coat on because the sun's about down, so it's a little bit cooler. I'm still plenty hot, and I got burned today at my son's baseball game. Had a false confidence under the sunshade. It was still coming through there, but you live and you learn. But so I'm gonna get going on this, and then maybe get stain on it tonight. I don't know. I was thinking to maybe get stain on top, so then when I tape it down for toning, it would be good and dry. So we'll see if I can get that done or not, or I might just go to bed. So for the stain, I'm using Minwax Wood Finish in Special Walnut, and I have wet the top kind of as a slip coat, and I have the stain just here in my little Tupperware container, and I have this paint edger that I'm using that is really great at getting the stain on that surface quickly, which is especially important with the warm weather, and makes the stain want to dry faster. I'm going to be really careful at my edges, just that I don't possibly drip down my paint. And one of the reasons I did that slip coat was because of the warm temperature. It'll just help the stain absorb into the wood grains more slowly. I don't want to dry out. And then I'll come in on the front trim pieces with a foam brush because I can be a little bit more careful with that. Oh, there's a buggy. All right, that's on there nice and good now. And then I will just start wiping back. I have these lint-free cloths that I like to fold and just use. Man, the summer bugs. And as I'm wiping back, I really want to make sure that, you know, I get off all the excess, because you don't want any streaks on here. I'll have to be extra careful since it's nighttime and the light's just not as good. Probably need to get one more rag that I have off screen. I think I'm flinging a little bit of stain. I need to be more careful. Now for the trim, I'm having to tone that because it is a different type of wood than the top of it. And even after stain, it just doesn't match, and there's some like blotchiness in how it received the stain. So I am using a Mohawk's toner in a medium brown, and it thankfully is a really good match. And I am carefully going along because the tricky part of toner is it can easily get uneven. And so this is something I've just had to practice with and get better. I've had a major fail with trying to tone on top of a dresser. So this strip is at least easier to deal with, but, you know, it's still something I'm working on. All right, now it's time for top coat finally. I am going ahead and top coating all of the dresser. Technically, this paint does extremely well without a top coat. It's very, very durable. I've seen people like do a scratch test with a coin on it, and it's unbelievably durable. Doesn't scratch at all. So I'm just going to do 2 coats on the base, but then 4 on top to really protect it. And then, of course, lightly sand in between coats for a really smooth finish. Okay, remember that hardware that was that, like, really dull aluminum color? Well, I tried the Rub and Buff on there, didn't like that, and so I went ahead with a spray paint that I really like. It's Gold Leaf by Krylon, and I'm choosing to spray it while holding it just because of that handle. I'm afraid that it will kind of create little creases or lines in the paint if I sprayed with it flat on there. So I'm trying to hold it the best that I can and spray at every angle to get it on there. And almost to the finish line. So I have a few last steps of painting inside the base. And then, you know, an issue I'm having with the drawers is that they're wanting to rub on each other. So I'm just going to take my orbital sander to shave off some of the bottom on my problem drawers. And that way when it opens or shuts, it's not going to rub against the paint and scratch it off. Well, I was putting hardware on and I pulled the drawer out, and it's basically okay here, but you can see that it got stuck there and it's peeled back the paint. So I'm going to have to sand this back some, so when I repaint it, it doesn't, well, when I repaint both spots, it doesn't stick again. But, you know, I try to be careful about things like this, but, you know, sometimes it just happens when you are, you know, applying paint. And I actually see a spot here that I'm gonna have to touch up. And as you can see, after doing that, it closes without rubbing. So unfortunately, that's just something you have to deal with when you paint dressers sometimes. Like the inside of the dresser, the drawers are also quite dirty, so I'm just taking a damp cloth with some dish soap and wiping them down so they are good and clean before I put the feed and wax on them, and then I'll finally be finished. All right, it's been a while, so let's take a look back at what this dresser looked like in the beginning. Nothing major, but lots and lots of little dings, and I needed to repair the drawers and switched out that hardware in the middle that just caused a lot of damage to the drawer fronts that I had to fix. So there was quite a bit more work in this than I had anticipated, but as you can see, it turned out fantastic. This color did not disappoint in the least and provided such a beautiful contrast to the gold hardware and then the stained top. But what do you think? I would love to know your thoughts. I imagine there'll be some of you that'll be mad that I painted over the wood, but I think it's still a really beautiful piece of furniture, and I know that someone will enjoy having it in their home. All right, you remember probably that this was part of a competition that Lisa with Ivy Lane Interiors was doing. I unfortunately did not win. I didn't even make the top 3, but that's okay. There were a lot of really amazing submissions, and this was the winning submission. Isn't it beautiful? This is by Darlene from A Gleam Design Co. That's her handle on Instagram if you want to check her out. I'm also going to link Lisa's video once it goes live. That will feature her piece that she redoes, and then also the top 3 finalists and the winner again. As always, thank you so much for watching. I am so grateful for all of you who have subscribed, and if you haven't already, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button and follow along for my future flips.